Representative Matt Gaetz withdraws his nomination for Attorney General after a meeting with the Senate. Alejandro Mayorkas and Christopher Wray skip out on a public Senate hearing on national security threats. And country music legend Lee Greenwood will join us to explain why God Bless the USA is back on the charts 40 years after it was released. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Thursday, November 21st. Earlier today, Matt Gaetz withdrew himself from consideration for the position of Attorney General. In an X post, Gaetz wrote that while the momentum was strong, it's clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance transition. Thus, I will be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as Attorney General. Here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Rebeka Zeljko. She's the political reporter for Blaze News. So, Rebeka, what is all the talk right now in D.C. about Matt Gaetz withdrawing from the Attorney General position?
Yeah, I mean, this announcement was just as shocking as the original nomination, to be honest. I was on my way to a lunch. I was in an Uber when I saw the news. I was scrambling to write this up. But basically, within just less than 2 weeks of the announcement, Gaetz decided that he was going to withdraw from the race, or rather from the nomination. And this comes as he has been having these Senate meetings over the last few days with different Senate Republicans and sort of trying to make his pitch to make sure that although Republicans hold the majority in the Senate, it is rather slim going into the 119th Congress. And so there was definitely some legwork to be done there. And I guess coming out of those meetings, it didn't really seem like maybe he would have the votes, which was some of the speculation going into this nomination, was that maybe he might be too provocative of a politician. He did make an attempt. He met with many senators who, as you mentioned, he said had very positive takeaways. But at the end of the day, it seemed like maybe he just didn't have enough votes to actually go through with the confirmation.
Yeah, Rebeka, and we should remind our audience, I mean, it's not a lot of votes, right? You only need a few senators to say no. People like Murkowski and others who've been mentioned publicly now, none of whom would surprise our audience. And then all of a sudden that makes it impossible. This, to me, brings us back to the reality of Senate confirmation battles. People need to understand that this is how it works, and all you need is a couple of these people, right, to say no. So where does he go from here, do you think? Because that'll be indicative of whether or not this was part of, a lot of people have suggested this was part of a plan, right? They're putting him out here to get him out of Congress, out of the ethics probe, and on the path towards something else. I have no idea, but people are saying that. What do you think he does next? What do we know?
Well, that's a lot of talk right now is what's the 4D chess that's going on behind the scenes. And I'm in a similar boat as you. A lot of people are sort of left speculating what his next move will be. As you mentioned, he could really only afford to lose three votes in the Senate, assuming that J.D. Vance was acting as that potential tiebreaker. But as you said, it's sort of up in the air. He hasn't confirmed whether or not he is going to remain in the House. It's worth noting that when he resigned in his resignation letter, he said that he had no intent to swear into the 119th Congress, although he's not necessarily barred from serving again if he decided to swear in that oath. And so we'll see if he returns to the House as he has in previous years, or if he decides to take up a new career. J.D. Vance, he commented on Matt Gaetz's withdrawal from the race, and he had mentioned that his future seems really bright, and he's clearly one of the very capable members of Congress who's aligned with President Trump. And so I'm sure that we'll be seeing more of him in the future. There's some speculation about where he will be going to next. There's been some rumors about him potentially running for governor of Florida, or if DeSantis would actually appoint him to fill Rubio's seat, who is likely to be confirmed to the Senate. So there's a lot of speculation, but there's not a great basis in terms of confirmed reporting. So we'll have to see how this unfolds over the next few months. But either way, it'll be fascinating to watch.
It absolutely will be. And I remember, Rebecca, that the day that we announced that Matt Gaetz was going to be the person that they would put up for Attorney General was the exact same day that Thune became the new Senate Majority Leader. And we were talking on this show, like, these two things don't feel like they would really go together. So what does this tell us now about Trump's mandate and how it's going to be moving going forward?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, there's always going to be a slight disconnect between what is the popular sentiment, what is the MAGA mandate, and what is actually going to take place in Washington, D.C. At the end of the day, the Republican Party is Trump's party, but with a lot of these federal nominations, they are going to require Senate confirmation. And although the Senate is a perfectly fine representation of people to the extent that they're elected, they aren't necessarily a perfect representation of the party, or at least the party leader. And so I think I think there's a lot of expectation that there was going to be some difficulty with confirmations for nominees like Gaetz. And so I think it's just a testament to the fact that there is ultimately this disconnect between what the MAGA mandate is and who's actually elected into the Senate.
Rebecca, we should say, I want to make sure we mention these names out loud. And if you have anything to add, please do. I mean, Jonathan Swan, right, a while ago, New York Times, he said Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Susan Collins of Maine, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, and John Curtis of Utah were the people who were not going to support him, and that pretty much does it. So there's that. Real quick, for the future, are you hearing anything about who the AG nominee may be? Certainly, Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, and Andrew Bailey, Attorney General of Missouri, are in the race. They were spoken about early on. Anyone else out there? And what are you hearing?
Those are honestly the two names that I've heard the most. And I think for good reason. I think it's because both of those potential candidates, although there have not been any formal announcements since Gaetz' withdrawal, I think because both of those candidates are very aligned with the MAGA mandate and with Trump's policies, I think that's why we see those names resurface a lot, especially now that Gaetz has stepped down from his bid for Attorney General. But I think that what differentiates him from Gaetz is maybe that those two candidates don't necessarily carry the same burdens that he does. There's a lot of drama surrounding Congressman Gaetz, or former Congressman Gaetz. There's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of scandal, for better or for worse. But those other two candidates don't necessarily carry the same baggage, let's just say, for in terms of Washington, D.C. They are more likely, I think, to get through the Senate because the Republicans that you mentioned who otherwise would not have approved Gaetz don't really have a good reason to vote against someone like Ken Paxton. And so I think that's probably a more realistic bid. We'll have to see how it actually unfolds. But I think that both of those candidates are probably going to be at the top of Trump's list.
Rebecca, it's certainly going to be interesting. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Matthew, it's like Rebecca said, the biggest news of the day since Matt Gaetz was originally announced, right? Like Matt Gaetz, no matter what, right? Firebrand, he is going to be out there and a headline drawer for sure, either way.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, there's part of me that he's very good at playing the game. He's very smart about this stuff. And it is funny, like it did cross a lot of people's minds that maybe there was some maneuvering going on here and some 4D chess, as Rebecca said. But who knows? Look, the thing is, there's a point to be made about those four senators, right, and who they will and won't vote for. And I think the thing that I've thought from the beginning, whether it's 4D chess or not, is if you have Gaetz come out there who's such a firebrand, so controversial, and then all of a sudden you put someone like a Ken Paxton out there, and Ken Paxton, look, he's fought the establishment, the entire very powerful Texas establishment, going into the Bush family and everyone else. He's given everyone here the finger and won. So he does have enemies. He does have investigations against him, right, in Texas that could be dragged out into the national spotlight. But it's way less sexy than the Gaetz stuff, right? So you can see now, all of a sudden, he looks like, oh, well, he's Attorney General of a big state, okay. He's been in some political battles. We get him in. Or, same with Bailey. God knows what's out there about him. These people would all be attacked in the same way, right, or worse. I mean, we live in a Kavanaugh world, right, where God knows what they can pull out at you. But it does feel like this drew some of the energy, right? They all made a beeline in there to pounce on Gaetz, and now we'll see what happens.
Yeah, anywhere you go from here, it's all going to be a lot easier from this point forward. When we come back, the head of the FBI and DHS failed to attend a Senate hearing. We'll bring you the latest from the deep state just ahead. As the world teeters on the brink of annihilation, Dietrich Bonhoeffer is swept into the epicenter of a deadly plot to assassinate Hitler in Angel Studios' upcoming film, Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Assassin, and Spy. It hits theaters tomorrow, but you can get showtimes right now at angel.com/Jill. With his faith and fate at stake, Bonhoeffer must choose between upholding his moral convictions or risking it all to save millions of Jews from genocide. Will his shift from preaching peace to plotting murder alter the course of history or cost him everything? Now, I can tell you guys, I've already watched this. This movie is so good. I plan on going and seeing it again in Angel Studios. They've done such great work, and they also have made the movie Cabrini, which was excellent. But this movie right now is a must-see for the times in which we live. So find it this weekend. Get your tickets right now at angel.com/Jill. Earlier today, FBI Director Chris Wray and Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas declined to testify publicly at a scheduled Senate hearing on threats to global national security. This is a break in the precedent that has been set by years of open testimony. So here to discuss is J. Michael Waller. He's a senior analyst for the Strategy for Center for Security Policy, and he's the author of Big Intel: How the CIA and FBI Went from Cold War Heroes to Deep State Villains. So thanks for coming back on the show. And let's just dive right into this. Why do we not see these two men? Why are they declining to give this public testimony?
We don't know why they're declining, but certainly anything they say can and will be used against them once they leave office. So maybe that's one of the reasons. What it shows, though, is that they are contemptuous of Congress, and so they should be held up to the Bannon and Navarro standard and treated accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting standard, although we should say it's a new standard, right, that the left has established. Do you have any hope that Republicans actually hold them to that standard? Is that in the works?
I don't see it. But they still should. I just don't see it.
Do you think, let's put it this way, yeah, I don't either, actually, but do you think that that there will be some justice for these guys later on? I mean, it does seem like we potentially are going to have some people in place who might actually go after misdeeds committed over the last 4 years. I have a little bit more hope about that, but what do you think?
Well, yeah, and of course, somebody like Chris Wray, for him, prestige matters more than anything else. And once his wrongdoing is really uncovered from the inside, he'll never be able to recover from it. If I was running the show, I would have an investigation of Homeland Security Secretary Navarro, a counterintelligence investigation of him, because I don't think he was working with U.S. interests in mind.
Yeah, say more about that. I mean, I think that people know that Wray is bad news, but say more, drag that out into the light for us. What do you think is underneath the hood?
Well, it's one thing to be a DC insider and then become a head of the FBI, but really you don't run the FBI. The FBI runs you. So Chris Wray was the palace eunuch of the Bureau. That's part of how DC works, but that's not treason. Looking at Mayorkas, though, it's different. I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm just saying that something's not right, because if you have somebody born in Cuba at his age who comes here as an infant, they're all solidly anti-communist. The only ones who are doing everything the Cuban regime pretty much wants are people who've been co-opted somehow during the way in their lives. And the Cuban regime, they've got a really excellent intelligence service that we vastly underestimate. And I can't find a thing that Mayorkas has done as Homeland Security Secretary that's been against the interests of the Cuban Communist Party.
Well, we know that they like to cover up their tracks. And we talked to you before about paper shredders and everything that was going on. Earlier this week, we saw an industrial paper shredder truck that was parked right outside of the DOJ. Now, it's just me. Maybe you don't try and put the gigantic truck with the logo parked, park it around the corner, you guys. What do you see when you see something like this, that they're just, I mean, I don't know, are they trying to troll us at this point, or is this actually happening?
It's actually happening, but I think in this case, there are underground garages there. There are lots of discreet ways of doing things, and that they've always been that way. But in this case, I think they're really giving the finger at the Trump administration and to the rest of the country, saying, we're going to destroy documents, whether you like it or not, and we're going to do it in a huge way. So they're sending a message.
Hey, so I have to ask you today's. I mean, Gaetz is out, right? Gaetz was in, Gaetz is out. Speaking of the DOJ, what are you hearing in terms of who might actually be nominated now? And do you have any thoughts about who that person should be?
Well, it was kind of funny because with Matt Gaetz, who it took me a while to get used to the idea of him as Attorney General, and I thought, no, we really need a wrecking ball. We need somebody who just doesn't care, doesn't want a big law firm job, doesn't want the prestige, doesn't want to make friends. He just wants to do the job. So I thought after some consideration, he'd be the right guy. But there are other folks out there too. There's Mark Paoletta, a fine individual. There's a Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, although we need him in Texas, but we also need him in the country. So there are a couple other people out there who would be excellent attorneys general.
Well, while we have you here, let's talk about the funding for the State Department's Global Engagement Center. It's set to expire at the end of the year. Now, it tracks disinformation and correctly puts it on the record nationally. So could Donald Trump, and if we look at him, the congressional Republicans, could they decline to renew this type of funding?
Sure, and I think they should in this case because it's completely lost its way. I'm very supportive of the State Department tracking foreign disinformation and countering it. It's part of the State Department's job. In fact, I worked on that years ago with the Reagan administration with the Office to Counter Soviet Active Measures, which was an interagency group that included the State Department. So it's a really important job when it's done right, but it's just been completely abused and politicized. So we should just shut it down and start fresh later on.
I mean, have you written anything, or do you have anything out there in terms of like a structure for cleaning house at these departments? Because one of the things, I hear all these ideas. We know a lot of smart people, right, who talk about this. But when you think, I keep on thinking about this, right? When you think about Department of State, the State Department. I mean, this is a place that people have been talking about cleaning house for decades. Right. And when you think about the Department of Justice, the thorough sort of corruption that's there, the wrecking ball you were talking about, I mean, this is not going to be easy. And a lot of people have talked a big game for a long time, as you know, and not done the job. So what's kind of advice do you give about how to really clean house at either of these enormous departments?
It's really hard when you're dealing with people, and it's much easier to say and recommend than it is to do. But in Big Intel, I gave a chapter on what to do with the FBI, how to break it apart and parcel out the functions and the people with them to other agencies so that there's no centralized power that can abuse the public. I had a similar plan for CIA, and these are just to get conversations started, but there are ways to do it. With the State Department, though, State Department is one of the most vicious agencies of the U.S. government. It's even more vicious sometimes than the intelligence services. So when you're talking about state, it's a question of redefining its mission. It was not originally created as a foreign ministry. It was created to handle matters of state, and it became a foreign ministry over time. But I think if you reduce the State Department severely, I think you could cut back by 2/3 to 3/4 on the personnel. A lot of really unnecessary personnel, in addition to personnel who are doing worthless or counterproductive missions. And you make it a consular service, meaning looking after U.S. interests in other countries and U.S. citizens in other countries. And then a very small, very skilled diplomatic service like we used to have before, even, say, going back to the time of John Quincy Adams, who was sort of the classic the American diplomat and diplomatic leader. You can accomplish a lot with very little, as Donald Trump proved when he hammered out the Abraham Accords in the Middle East. State Department was hardly involved at all.
So we know Donald Trump has put up Radcliffe for CIA already. We're still waiting on the pick for FBI. A lot of people think it's Kash Patel. Your thoughts on Radcliffe for sure being nominated, and then who would you like to see put in the director of the FBI?
Well, Radcliffe is a really good pick for the CIA because he has a lot of experience. He was already director of national intelligence. He got his feet wet in that and he got burned a little bit. So that's all really healthy and it's good experience for him. It's a tough time right now in the world. We're up against the Chinese and the Russians and the jihadis and everybody else. We need to have a strong foreign intelligence service like the CIA, but we also need to slash that down to its real essence to make it an elite service that's not going to be abusing the public. I think Ratcliffe can do that, but it's a question of, does he have the presidential authority and the chainsaw necessary to make it happen? As far as FBI director, again, it's kind of like Matt Gaetz. Kash Patel's a great guy. When I first heard his name being floated as FBI director, I thought, well, it's going to take some getting used to. But there you do need a wrecking ball. You do need someone with experience in intelligence. So he doesn't have he's a lawyer without law enforcement experience, but he's got intelligence experience. And of course, the FBI is a domestic intelligence agency with police powers, which it never was until the past 25 years. So he's a really ideally situated person who, like Matt Gaetz, doesn't care about making friends in Washington, wants to accomplish the mission. So he's the right guy to be the last FBI director. Take an orderly way to pull the thing apart and don't take any nonsense from the people who would otherwise try to bind his arms.
I love the sound of that phrase, the last FBI director. Do you have any thoughts before we go about the strengths and weaknesses, Tulsi Gabbard, if she was, to walk into that role?
Well, there's nothing like a person who's been burned badly who can do a really good job to undo things. If you look at her track record, I'd never put her in such a position like that just based on her statements in the past. On the other hand, she's been burned. On the other hand, she's had a last-minute conversion. So I think that somebody like her, who also doesn't care about making friends, doesn't want to have a beltway existence where she's going to get rich as a contractor after running intelligence, I think she'd be a remarkable choice for this. And I think she should also be the last director of national intelligence. She should preside over dismantling it and returning it to a state where our intelligence community serves the public, not abuses the public.
Jay McAwaller, you're speaking our language. It's music to our ears. I hope that they can get that done. Thanks for joining us today.
Great to be with you both.
Matthew, it's just one of those things where, again, we hope that these are the people that are going to be put in the positions and they actually follow through with the things that we've all been talking about now for about 2 weeks.
Well, I recommend, if you're interested in this and you're listening out there, go get his book,
Yes.
Big Intel, start reading up on this, because whoever comes in is going to need to adopt an actual plan. And as a citizen, you need to have an understanding of just how messy this situation is. So, it's exciting because I've never been this close to thinking we actually are going to put in people who are going to try to really do the deal. And we're really talking about the real problem, the extent of the real problem. That's incredible, but it still has to be done.
When we come back, it'll be another great patriot. Lee Greenwood will join us to explain why many people are still proud to be Americans. Just ahead. Oh, it's just in time for Thanksgiving travels. BlazeTV is dropping its latest Blaze original. It's the countdown to the next aviation disaster. For the last 4 years, the FAA has been plagued by outdated technology and the shift towards DEI hiring practices. And the results are alarming. From mid-flight Boeing malfunctions to a sharp rise in near misses, the aviation industry has never felt more unsafe. Under Pete Buttigieg and the Harris-Biden administration, well, it was once the safest way to travel, and now it's facing unprecedented danger. In this documentary, Stu Breer uncovers the truth behind the chaos, and he speaks with former air traffic controllers, aviation lawyers, and even Robert Poole, the inventor of the TSA PreCheck. Bless that man, I use it all the time, to reveal how the FAA's abandonment of merit-based practices is putting lives at risk. This is a documentary now. It's exclusive to Blaze TV Plus subscribers. So if you're not a subscriber yet, visit blazeoriginals.com/BNT and use the promo code DEI to save $30 off your annual subscription. So join us today to despite all of the stuff that you're not going to see anywhere else, we are going to bring you the unfiltered truth. So join us here at The Blaze. America is in the process of becoming great again. After Donald Trump's victory, Lee Greenwood's song, God Bless the USA, hit the charts again 40 years after it was written. And Lee joins us now to talk about it. So you were out there, you saw Donald Trump playing this song at every campaign rally. It was so great to see. So what was it like to see your song play such a central role in this campaign and then see it back on the charts again 40 years later?
Well, it's pretty exciting. I've sang for 10 different presidents, and I think, the first entrance to the RNC was probably the 1984 convention with Ronald Reagan. And then I had a congressional appearance at the White House with the Reagan and Bush family. 41 became my very good friend. I worked on his campaign. So yes, he would speak, I would sing. It happened all the time. And then for 43, we worked on his campaign and did a lot of the rallies with him as well. He would speak, I would sing. Sometimes I would sing first. In this case, with Donald Trump and now winning the presidency again, they always play my song. And there's a variety of things that have went by the wayside where I would actually come on stage and sing with him. And when I do, and I see you have the Madison Square Garden performance there, I would sing, but he wanted me to sing the whole song. It wasn't like on radio where they can kind of turn you down and then go to talking. It's like he would come on stage, peruse the audience, and politely wait until I sang the whole song. That's an incredible honor for me, and very humbling to know that, I'm a farmer from California, for God's sake, and it's like it's pretty high cotton to sing for the president.
Lee, tell us about, how did this start with Trump? Like, when did you first meet Trump?
My wife was Miss Tennessee, USA, and so Donald Trump owned Miss Universe, and he owned it for 21 years. And so he sold it when he ran for president the first time. And then my wife and I would go to national pageants. She runs Tennessee, Georgia, and Mississippi, executive director. And so I would meet him occasionally at the pageants. I don't know that it had any bearing on the fact that he decided to use my song for his pageant. His pageant, that's pretty funny. That he would use God Bless USA for his campaign. However, he did, and I was flattered. And the conversation never ensued where he would ask me, can I use this, or did it? The Trump team never called us. And the first time that we were sitting in the living room and I heard my song played before his rally, and he stood there just waving at people while it's being played. And I had the neighbors call me, and my wife come in, and so we had sat on the couch and watched it, and it was like, man, that's pretty cool. And I don't know that there was any conversation about yes or no. And of course, then you saw I sang for the 2016 inauguration at Lincoln Memorial. And that's the second time I'd done that. The first time was for 41 at the exact same place. Security was doubled, however, for Trump. And now this time around, I'm sure security will be quadrupled to protect the president.
Absolutely. Well, that means that you've seen him in several different venues. You've been out there with him all over the place. So I'm curious, because you're out there on stage and you can see Donald interacting with the crowd, right? He has a different energy about him. His rallies have become infamous. So what is it like to be up there on stage and watching Donald Trump interacting with the crowd and the energy that's there in that moment?
Well, let me give you two instances. I was doing a private performance at Mar-a-Lago, and it was on the lawn outside, and there's about 100 people, and we weren't expecting the president. And I had my trio with me, so it was somewhat informal. And the president comes out and sits in the front row, casually dressed, just among his friends. And I said, "Good evening, Mr. President. Thanks for attending." So you have that environment. And then let's go to Madison Square Garden, where security was incredible. We had, 30, how many people sit in Madison Square Garden? Thousands, 60, I don't know. There was 100,000 people outside, I know that. It was just an amazing audience, very electric. And instead of playing my song, which would have been appropriate as an introduction, because he's done it all the way along, he actually said, I want Greenwood to sing live. So the Secret Service came to me and said, okay, when you mount the stage, stay to the left. We want the shot with just President Trump and his wife, Melania, by themselves. So I know my place. Sure, I stand over there on the side and wait till I finish the song. Well, as soon as the president takes the stage, addresses the audience, then he immediately faces me. I can't tell you how electrifying that is. That he would turn to me while I'm singing and acknowledge me when this is his show. I have no place here. I'm just a musician, a singer. So, like we precede, the important people. And for him to do that and then reach out and shake hands with me, I shook hands with the First Lady. And then, as you noticed, I left the stage. He kind of gave me a whack on the back, like, thanks, man. Appreciate you being here, which showed his friendship and his loyalty to me as well. He's a very loyal guy. So I can't wait to see what he's going to do the next 4 years.
So was there a point at which, in your career where, it's probably multiple points, right? Where you had this moment where you saw this song sort of take off in this transcendent way? Did you always think about it the same way? Because it really is, it's remarkable. You're saying you're sitting on your couch, watching Trump, but it already had made this impact. How do you kind of think about the song?
Well, you'd have to walk in my shoes, because from the moment I wrote it, which is 1983 in the fall, then the record company calling it up as a single, which wasn't our intention. It was never supposed to be in the schedule of releases for me as a country artist. Universal was Irving Azoff, the president who actually made the call. And I compliment him for that decision, because it wasn't one that I would have made. And then move forward, and we have the Gulf War, for instance, where General Schwarzkopf used the song to energize the troops just before they went to war. And then President Reagan, remember my time with President Reagan, sang with him. And then we have the attack on America, which more of Americans then suddenly realized that we need something to bring us back. And not the national anthem, not God Bless America or America the Beautiful, and all of those songs, which are included on the American Patriot CD, by the way, which I recorded in 1992, the same year I married my wife. So I did two great things that year, not in that order. And so American Patriot is just released this year again, 32 years later, on vinyl. It was never recorded on vinyl. And I think that just the reason they did that, because God Bless USA now is on Spotify, Alexa, and all the download platforms, wherever you can find it. And they said, well, we're going to take advantage of that and release it on vinyl. See, it was only recorded on a CD before. And so it is a special occasion. This year is 40 years of my writing the song, and being released on radio.
It's incredible. And again, just thinking throughout my history with it, and just after 9/11, I was in high school at the time. Everybody was listening to it and playing it because you wanted that sense to feel the patriotism. And you can feel that right now, once again, back in the country. Lee Greenwood, thanks so much for joining us today.
And thank you very much. And of course, we have the God Bless USA Bible now.
That's right.
Which has had a great impact on this week, which is National Bible Week. And if people want to have it, by the way, you can have it. Here's a copy here. GodBlessUSABible.com. Thanks.
That's excellent, Lee. Thanks so much. Yeah. And Matthew, this is one of the things that we've talked about, is just the renewed sense of patriotism. It's cool again to love the country.
God Bless the USA Bible, right? .com. He's doing it. It's interesting, like the tracking of patriotism in the country and the ups and downs can kind of be tied to that song. That was fascinating. I'm sure that's old hat for him. He knows this already. Tell me something I don't know. But very interesting. I'd like to ask him some more questions someday. I
absolutely would too. But when we come back, there's highs and there's lows. Our next guest will explain the phenomenon of doom scrolling and how you can break free from it when we return. Are you stuck in the doom scroll? The endless cycle of bad news, social media outrage, and digital despair? Well, tonight we're going to tackle the phenomenon of doomerism and why so many people are addicted to negativity online, and more importantly, how to break free from it. In a recent piece on Blaze News, our style writer O.W. Root explained how to stop this destructive behavior and take control. So he joins us now. So OW, what is doomerism, and why do you think that this has become so addictive for people in today's digital age?
Doomerism it's kind of a fake LARP. It's kind of this live action role play. It's this performative sadness, this performative depression by someone who wants secretly to be depressed, who wants secretly to be sad or think that everything is hopeless. Because if things were truly hopeless, and I mean, if one's life was truly terrible, you really wouldn't want to constantly be reminded of how terrible it was. So it's this almost kind of strange and toxic itch to want to be depressed. And it's a very bizarre modern phenomenon that seems to be exacerbated extremely by social media on the internet.
So why do you think people are drawn into this? What lures them? Why do they want to do this? Because you see it, right? You see it out there. And so what's the cause?
I think a lot of people aren't going to like this, but it's almost because things are too good for people. People don't have enough actual problems, real problems. There's this great saying, if you are hungry, you have one problem. And that's a really great way to understand life. If you're hungry, you have one problem. And I think all of us know that when something's really tragic going on, a death or just something that's really tragic, you are not trying to search out other things to make yourself more depressed. You are just focused on this one thing, and you are focused on that problem. But when you don't have any problems like that, you kind of want to create problems. And we see people want to create problems. They almost want to be miserable.
Yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying there, but I would look at it and I would just say, okay, if this is what you're doing, are we consciously doing this? Are we subconsciously doing this? And what are some of the worst effects on us that from actually doing this, whether we know it or not?
Yeah, is it conscious or unconscious? I don't think it's necessarily conscious. I think that it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. Once you get going in one direction, you just kind of keep going farther and farther in that direction. And same thing for positivity, same thing for action and movement. And I think the solution is to act in your real life and control that which you can control, make positive change where you can make positive change. And I think we all know this is once you start getting moving in that direction, you see other things start to move in that direction. And it's this sort of perpetual motion. And a lot of doomerism is based on this sort of perpetual negative emotion. And it's a toxic sort of spiral. And you can have a positive spiral, but it involves taking control and acting in your real life, in the real, that which you can actually see.
Now, I think there's forms of doomerism that are not just, caused or related to people who are online a lot of the time. But nonetheless, what you're talking about is related to media, particularly social media. And you talk about discourse, something called discourse addiction. It's your phrase. And talk a little bit about, explain what discourse addiction is and how this shapes the way people end up interacting with the real world.
Yeah, so this is stuff that all of us here who are very online, we're aware of this whole thing where the discourse so often is based on some sort of red meat bait, some sort of rage bait thing that gets thrown out there, some hot take, some offensive thing, something that's designed to make you ticked off. And then it spirals and spirals, quote tweets, boom, 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 boom. And you repeat that every single day. And there's never anything else other than, or the basic core premise of most of it is everything's bad, it's only getting worse, everybody's terrible, and everybody's only getting worse. And these problems are unfixable. And it can run all the way from interpersonal relationships, the gender war, culture war, politics, geopolitics, whatever. It's just there's always in the discourse a general trend towards it's terrible, it's only getting worse, there's no way out.
Well, that's lovely. OW, save us from all of this doom. I mean, how do I go out there and reclaim control of my life and stop all of this?
It's the answer is not Pollyannaism. It's not just to sort of be sort of naive and just say, "Oh, everything's great," where the meme of the house is burning down and the dog or whoever it is sitting at
This
the
is
table. It's
fine.
like everything's fine.
Yeah.
That's not it. I call it vital realism. Yeah, acknowledging things are not ideal where they're not ideal, but taking control where you can take control. Because a key aspect of the doomerism thing is where you direct all your energy far away toward these domains that you can't control anyway, while you're neglecting the domains you can control. And once you start impacting those domains you can control, and there's many things in your life, it's this acknowledgement that yes, things might not be ideal, but they're never going to be ideal, and they never were ideal. But make a positive change, make a positive difference, and move in a direction of elevation where you can, and that will lead to more positive growth and development.
OW Root. I love it. I love that we ended on a positive note after doomerism. Thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you again.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
I love that he was saying that because as a former sports reporter myself, working with a lot of college football coaches, one of the things that you would hear all the time is control what you can control, right? It's all about the environment that you place yourself in. And there are going to be so many things that you can't control.
Yeah.
So own what you can.
Yeah, I think this is just a principle for life. First off, you need to own something or you won't be happy, right? If you don't have a sense of self-ownership or that you are in control of something, right, you won't be happy. But the thing is, as you're saying, there's always some part of it that is in your control that you can do something with. And that's the small patch of earth that's if you focus on it, can make you happy. And I'd add to that, another something else that comes from sports is you also want the practice to enjoy the practice, right? To enjoy the repetition, and to make that the thing that actually gives you happiness. And if you can do that, then you're on a path to success, right? And to a deeper kind of fulfillment.
Before you know it, we're going to be running Oklahoma drills here, and we're just going to go full on football, everything.
News tonight, workout.
That's it. Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that our workouts are going to be coming up on this, but we will be back to wrap up the show right after this. Don't go anywhere. The biggest news of the day clearly is Matt Gaetz withdrawing his nomination for Attorney General. So, Matthew, I want to go back to that because this is what everybody, and not only just DC, but everybody across the country is going to be talking about today because it is such a big name, a big personality. There were so many thoughts when he was originally announced as the person that Donald Trump was going to nominate for Attorney General, and there are going to be just as many stories now about the unraveling of this story as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there will be an explosion of stories about it being over and we got Gaetz, but it happened so fast that I feel like it'll fall off a cliff. Like within 48 hours, no one will be talking about Gaetz, and they'll be talking about who the next nominee is going to be. And that's interesting, right? Because all these people, the knives came out for Gaetz. We're going to get him, with crazed eyes, and we're gonna cut him up, and then all of a sudden he's gone. And so I do think that pretty soon they'll try to claim a scalp, but we'll be off to the races with the next one. And when you talk about the next one, if you do have Andrew Bailey, who's a very good attorney general from Missouri, and Ken Paxton. There, I mean, I think Bailey doesn't have as much experience as Paxton. I mean, Paxton's from Texas and has this in a state with a border, right? So I would regard him as the front runner. But these are people who are also very interesting in their own right.
And we had Jay McAwaller on, and we got to hear his thoughts on Radcliffe being the CIA pick. He really liked that. And Kash Patel, he's like, at first I thought, okay, maybe. But it's interesting to me that we're still waiting on the FBI director's position at this point in time.
Yeah, I think that is notable. It probably means that there's a fight going on over who that should be. I think people need to realize that you can't really exaggerate. I mean, Trump has said this himself, but you can't exaggerate the extent to which people live and die for these positions. And then also you have different factions, right? Some of them who go by the name Republican, who are going to try to send in candidates who actually won't be good to thwart, the whole MAGA movement, and they'll pretend to be very nice. Like that, you got to think people live and die. Their entire life is about getting these positions. So things get fierce and wild behind the scenes.
And it's cool to be patriotic again, right? We've talked about being the cool kids once again, and we may or may not be the cool kids, depending on how we all looked at it all the way through. But we are definitely in the cool kid position now. But it's also cool to be patriotic and to love your country. And it's really cool to see Lee Greenwood and God Bless the USA back on the charts 40 years after he wrote it.
No, it really is remarkable. And it's sort of this natural, organic Trumpian thing, right? Where Trump just realizes, no, that song is that we want to play that song. And then it's almost like a kind of anthem for Trump, right? Bringing patriotism back, as Lee said. I mean, he would turn and everyone's silent and staring at Lee Greenwood singing the song. And I think that's ingrained in everyone's brains now, right? I mean, it's like a secondary anthem that is a sign of what side you stand on in this moment. And, you know, the fact that it's just growing, I mean, he's selling Bibles. I mean, you know, very, very interesting. Very interesting.
It's definitely our chance to go out there and make a new frontier, if you will, Matthew.
Oh, that's interesting. Funny you put it that way. I feel like there's a magazine called Frontier that's super cool, and only the coolest people would have it on their coffee tables from Blaze Media.
And you were explaining to me earlier today, like an old and a new coming together in the Frontier magazine realm. And that is where we are right now in the country, right? This old thing, thought to be old thing of where, it wasn't cool to be patriotic. Well, suddenly it's a new form of patriotism that we're seeing now.
Yeah, it's like the Constitution, patriotism mixed with, well, just look at the people. With Elon Musk sending rockets into space, you know, with David Sachs, a lot of these people in tech who are doing amazing things, just saying, no, we're the ones for peace. We're the ones who are for excellence. We're the ones for intelligence. And this other side is really, you know, it's low, it's base, it's disgusting, and it's frankly stupid. And where we're going, Texas and Florida are going to put men on Mars. Texas and Florida send people into space. And whatever they're doing on the coast, we don't know. There's poop on the streets. I don't know. It's kind of disgusting. People are leaving. But we're going to take the lead now. And you see that all over. So it's a combination of like old Americana coming back, but in a new way, right? So it's like the Tesla truck, and that's driving on the plains in the West, right next to the American bison, which we should bring back and let roam the plains free again.
We totally should do that. You know, whether or not they're playing 4D chess in Washington, D.C., we don't know. Remains to be seen. It'll all play itself out either way. But a good reminder of now, just control what you can control in your life.
Oh, pulling in the OW route.
Yes.
Just a great point. And not to be doomer scrolling, there are things you can control. And the more that we each try to control them, the happier we will be. And I mean, I need to hear that lesson probably more than anyone else, but it's so good to hear because it's so true.
I go out there and sometimes I have to just tell myself, put the phone down, put the computer down, and open up an actual book. And it's amazing how much better you feel when you actually have a book in your hands.
Yes. Instead of feeling tired, dragged out, and like you didn't accomplish anything, right? You feel it's like you just had a healthy meal, right? You're actually full, you feel nourished.
And then, workout plans coming soon, apparently. For
Blaze News Tonight workout plan. It's really for me. It's not so much
it
from
will
me.
Be. Don't worry. We'll break it all down tomorrow night. No workout plans, though, I promise you.